Today is Sunday, March 14th, 2021. And that means it's Pi Day. I'm your announcer, Matt Richardson, and I invite you to grab your Raspberry Pi computer and join us as we celebrate this geeky holiday on Raspberry Pi Foundation's Digital Making at Home live stream. We'll chat with Raspberry Pi Foundation co-founder Eben Upton, we'll meet some makers, we'll do some making, and we'll share some of our favorite Raspberry Pi projects. And now, without further ado, they're probably backstage reciting the digits of pi right now at this moment. Please welcome your hosts, Mr. C and Christina.
That's right, everybody. It's Pi Day. Thank you for that awesome intro, Matt. So cool. Powered by Raspberry Pi, that little board. And welcome everyone to this very special episode of Digital Making at Home. It's Pi Day, and so this episode is going to be extra awesome. If you haven't already, say hello in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. I'm Mr. C, and I'm coming to you live from Cambridge in the UK. And back with us once again is the always astounding Christina. How you doing, Christina?
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm joining from Nebraska in the USA. And thank you to everyone joining us for today's Pi Day special with Digital Making at Home. Happy Pi Day, Mr. C.
Happy Pi Day to you.
Today, we are celebrating Pi Day, Raspberry Pi, and Pi. We're speaking with Eben Upton, one of the founders and CEO of Raspberry Pi, celebrating with the community and talking with our special correspondent, Rob from the Magpie magazine, about some incredible Raspberry Pi projects. Then we'll get our Raspberry Pis out and make a cool interactive book using GPIO pins and Scratch.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I'm excited to do some making with you again, Christina, and it's been ages since we've seen Rob. I still play Rob's game, BBQ Dad, from time to time.
That's right.
It's a great Zen activity. And for those of you who are with us for the first time on Pi Day, welcome. Digital Making at Home is all about getting young people to become power users of the 21st century by learning to create with tech. We're on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook every week, and we're stoked that you're here with us. Your comments do come through to us live on those platforms, and we love getting all your input during the show. Please feel free to jump in, ask questions in the chat, let us know your opinion, give us some ideas, or just say hi.
Absolutely. We see your messages and questions, and we love hearing from you. Hey, friends, let us know in the chat how you are celebrating Pi Day. Pi Day. I'm so excited. I saw earlier Barry S. Mumblings on YouTube said that they ate some blueberry pie today, and I'm definitely going to be getting some pie later. I see Kat with Xavier and Zach. Hi, Zach and Xavier. Hello, Amit. Hello, Marco from Serbia. I see Daniel in Germany, Peter in South Africa, Chad with the cake emoji. That's right. It is a celebration, Chad, for sure. Larry, it's Pi Day. I know on YouTube, Ethan is also excited about Pi Day. We've got a lot of folks. I know CFP earlier in YouTube was like, wait, it's actually Pi Day. It is. Yeah. This is why we're here, friend, and we're so excited. And as Mr. C said, welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. We usually stream on Wednesdays, but since it's Pi Day, we are doing a special episode with the Digital Making at Home community. You can subscribe to our channel here or head to rpf.io/sub and get alerts for our content and when we go live. Every week we code, talk with cool people, and explore digital making. Subscribe and join this awesome community.
Yes, do subscribe. We love hanging out with all of you each week, and we've got something really cool running in the background today for Pi Day. It's kind of nerdy, to be honest, but I personally love it. We're calculating pi to as many decimal places as we can on an octopi using the Monte Carlo method. So cool. We've just started at doing calculations, and we'll check in on it at the end of the show to see how far it's progressed.
Whoa. Octopi, Monte Carlo method. Okay, Mr. C, you've got to run us through what this means.
Sure, sorry. I sometimes do that, when I get excited about stuff, I forget that not everyone knows what I'm on about. So the Monte Carlo method, for the first thing, is named after the casino, where people play random games of chance and things like that. So with this method of calculating pi, you have to imagine that you've got a dartboard with a radius of 1. So the distance from the center to the edge of your dartboard is 1.
Okay, I've got to be the teacher here, Mr. C, but 1 what? Inches, feet, miles?
Specificity. Okay, it doesn't matter in this instance. So you could use any of those. If you live in Europe, it could be centimeters, meters, or kilometers. Heck, it could be furlongs, chains, or cubits if you want. Doesn't matter. But if you have a circle with a radius of 1, any one, and you start throwing darts at your dartboard with a blindfold on, they'll fall in random places, right? To be honest, if I throw without the blindfold, they tend to go in random places. So some will hit the board and some will miss the board, right? If I'm throwing like this. So if we look at the proportion of the ones that hit and the ones that miss, we can calculate the area of our dartboard.
Okay, so because we know the area of the dartboard is equal to pi multiplied by the square of the radius, we can calculate pi. Now I see why the radius 1 was chosen. 1 squared is still 1. So that makes the calculation a lot quicker. Got it.
Definitely. Yeah, we're kind of cheating a little by doing that, right? It's like, it's just a very clever way to do some math. So you'd need to throw a lot of darts at this board to get an accurate calculation. And that's kind of where the octopi is important. So if I want to throw 8 billion darts, that's going to take a Raspberry Pi, a single Raspberry Pi, a very long time to calculate the number of darts that land inside or outside my circle. But if I take 8 and I link them all together,
and each one only has to calculate 1 billion darts.
Exactly. And if we tell each one to just calculate 1 million throws, but do that 1,000 times, we still get to 8 billion throws and we can find pi.
Well, all right, let's start those calculations. All right, there we go.
There it goes. And you can do this yourself if you want. You can take a look at our resources on Octopi at rpf.io/octopi. And so what we've done is we've asked the program here to throw a bunch of darts. So how many darts are you going to throw? You're going to throw 10,000 darts. And how many times are you going to do that? We've asked it to do it 100 million times. So essentially, it's just going to keep on going forever. Well, not forever, but for all intents and purposes. So we've got it going now. And this morning, we actually spotted another maker on Twitter who's using a different method called the spigot algorithm. You can see it here, along with a Raspberry Pi and a physical spigot. He actually made the spigot, which is super cool, to drip out the digits.
I love it. And we're seeing just so much excitement around Pi Day today. Makes sense. Thank you to those of you who are in the chat saying hi and also celebrating that, like, it's Pi Day. And I see someone asking, like, is Eben going to join? Yes, actually. Speaking of pi calculations, thank you for explaining that, Mr. C. We have a guest who also loves pi and calculations. Eben, come on up.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello. I like to be introduced to someone who likes pi.
That's right. Raspberry Pi, and pi. Oh, I'm all three. Are you guys all three?
Accurate biographical data. Had too much pi this evening. Rendered incoherent by pi.
Let's jump straight in, Skipper. Let's jump straight into our interview. So the obvious question we should ask you first is, what inspired the creation of the first-gen Raspberry Pi computers? Like, what was your intention when you thought up the idea?
Well, it was a really simple thing, right? It was that we didn't have enough young people who were excited about computers anymore. I got excited about computers because I had a little computer in my bedroom, or quite a large computer in my bedroom. Of course, nothing was little back in the 1980s in computing. And I had a BBC Micro in my bedroom, and then I had a Commodore Amiga. And they got me interested in computing and excited about computing, and they gave me a platform to play with. And that's how I got into computing. It's how I'm 42. It's how most people within 5 or 10 years, either side of my age, got interested in computing. But it was a moment in time, right? Particularly a big thing that was a moment in time was people buying general purpose computers to play games on. So your Spectrum, your Commodore 64, your Sinclair Spectrum, your BBC Micro, maybe you bought it to play games on. And that's great because you play games on it, but the first thing it does, it boots up into BASIC. And so the first thing you have to do if you want to play a game is write a line of BASIC to load. Absolutely. So chain, whatever it was. And that was great. And that meant that lots of people my age got into computing, at least to the level of 10 print, I am the best, 20 go to 10. And some of us got into it more than that. So that was fantastic. Then when those machines were replaced by games consoles, games consoles are incredibly powerful devices, but nobody ever bought a Nintendo and then was tricked into becoming a computer programmer in the same way I was kind of tricked into becoming a computer programmer by my BBC Micro. So the machines go away. The kids go away. A little while later, the students go away. So the people who are interested in coming to if you're trying to recruit people to come to university, the numbers go down. That's what happened to us getting on for 20 years ago now at Cambridge. We saw a collapse between 2000 and 2008, just a collapse, not a decline, a collapse in the number of people. And really, so Raspberry Pi still has this quite cargo culty kind of feel to it. It's like, well, if this lovely thing existed and went away, and then our students went away, if we bring the lovely thing back, maybe the students will come back. It was really that simple. And it was really about building a few thousand units to get a few hundred kids to apply to study computer science at Cambridge. That's all it was.
And now it's the most successful computer to ever be manufactured in the UK. Who is buying all these Raspberry Pis and why?
Well, that's a fascinating question that my board asks me all the time. But what the really interesting thing is that early on, if you think that the goal is to get them into the hands of children, the charitable goal, the mission goal is to get them into the hands of children. Over the course of the project, different groups of people who aren't children have bought them, and every time that's happened, it's been important. So we launched on the 29th of February. Weird. We launched on the 29th of February 2012. Yeah, it was strange, right? And we could have waited. If we just waited 2 weeks, then it would have been Pi Day. But let's do the 29th of February. Means we've only had 2 birthdays so far. It's kind of weird. So that first year we sold 1 million Raspberry Pis. Very, very few of those went into the hands of children. They went into the hands of people like us, enthusiasts, makers, hobbyists. And that was actually, at the time, seemed a little bit sad, right? It seemed like we weren't accomplishing our goal. But what we'd forgotten, of course, is that lots of those makers, those enthusiasts, their parents, or their volunteers at after-school clubs, or their teachers, and they took Raspberry Pi with them into our original market. So that's the thing that happened. It's a thing that still happens. And then the other thing that happened is some of those enthusiasts are professional engineers, and so they started to take Raspberry Pi with them into their jobs. And that's really, so we sold 7.073 million Raspberry Pis last. We sold about 39 million Raspberry Pis now, of which a little over 7 million were sold in 2020. And we reckon that over half of those, on the order of 4 million, probably went into industrial applications. So that's either someone buying Raspberry Pis and using them in an industrial way. I've got a factory, the Sony factory in Wales, where we build Raspberry Pi. It's full of Raspberry Pis, not just the ones they're making. It's also full of ones they've made and then bought back from us, sold to us, bought back from us, and are now using to automate their factories. So that's the big thing. And then the other thing people do is they embed Raspberry Pis into their into products, often industrial products, but some consumer products, like Matt's signboard, for example. And then so that's an amazing piece of kit that I have to buy. So my bank account is going to get punished, I think, by one of those very soon. But, that's a good example of somebody who had an idea for a product, and the easiest way for them to turn that into a reality was to put a Raspberry Pi inside it.
Cool. That's
Incredible,
really cool.
yeah.
And it's so ubiquitous too now. Like, you get shout outs in movies, TV. It was in Black Mirror. It was in like all sorts of TV shows. It's amazing. Incredible.
I loved Big Hero 6, where they Heroes Workbench, where they modeled both a Raspberry Pi Model B and a Raspberry Pi Model A, and he had lying at different places on his workbench both of the original models of Raspberry Pi in quite high fidelity. It was pretty impressive.
Awesome. So cool. And so, I mean, what surprised you the most about how people are using Raspberry Pi computers? Is it like the way they're doing in school and learning? Is it people using them in sort of industrial and work applications, or is it the hobbyists who are doing like crazy project things?
I think it's all of those things, but probably as a software engineer, so I come from a software engineering background. I've spent a lot of my adult life designing chips, including some of the chips that are in Raspberry Pi. But I'm a software engineer. And so my idea when we started Raspberry Pi is that people would do with their Raspberry Pis in an educational environment the same sort of stuff I did with my BBC and my Amiga, which is basically write computer games. But the interesting thing about the chips that we use in Raspberry Pi is they have these GPIO pins on them. So they were originally designed to go to mobile phones, and some of those GPIOs are designed to control aspects of the mobile phone. And the interesting thing that happened was I wasn't really interested in them, but Pete Lomas, who's my co-founder, said he is a hardware engineer. He's the guy who designed the original Raspberry Pi. And he said, no, we've got to take these GPIOs and put them on some sort of connector so people can get to them. And I was like, oh, God, all right, if you insist, fine. And of course, that's been the making of Raspberry Pi, right? Vastly more people in the hobbyist world, vastly more people in the industrial world, vastly more people in education use Raspberry Pi for physical computing. They use it to interact with the real world. And that's what I'd missed. And that's the surprise. Not a surprise for Pete at all, but it was a surprise for me.
Yeah, and we see that a lot, especially in education. I know the work that I do in the USA. We have a question from Zellatrix on YouTube. How come the Pi Zero came after the Pi 1? Good question, Zellatrix.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, naming conventions. Yeah, naming conventions is fun. I do naming conventions, so I try not to reserve too much of the fun stuff for myself at Raspberry Pi, but naming products is enormously good fun, and I try to do as much as I can. So 0 was, the idea is it's less than a Raspberry Pi 1. Now that's not entirely true, of course, because the chip that we put in 0 actually runs faster. It is the chip from the Raspberry Pi 1, but it's running at gigahertz instead of 700 megahertz, so it's running nearly 50% faster. But in all other respects, the 0 is less than a Raspberry Pi 1, so it doesn't have so many connectors, it doesn't have so much interfacing, it doesn't have the GPIO connection, for example, by default, although we will now sell you one that has a header fitted to it. The original 0 didn't have a fitted GPIO connector, and it had pads for it. So really, yeah, it's the idea is it's less than 1. It does raise the interesting question of what you would call a successor to Raspberry Pi 0. It's kind of sits there as an island, I suppose. And,
well, we've got Pico and we've got 0. So would there be like Nano in the middle, maybe, or
I don't know. It's weird, and so sort of. I mean, I would like to, if this one's left up to me, it'll end up being called Delta, which is an infinitesimally more than 0, or Epsilon, which is finitely more than a small finite amount more than 0. But I'm not going to be allowed to do that. So I suspect if we get round to doing a successor to Raspberry Pi 0, it'll be called Raspberry Pi 02, which is a horrible name, really. But it's probably all we've left ourselves. We should have started with Raspberry Pi 2, and then we would have Raspberry Pi 1 left.
Naming conventions, yeah.
Raspberry Pi 0.
Well, thank you, Zellatrix, for that question. And Eben, it makes sense. Thanks for explaining that. Also, I have to shout out Ethan. Let me find you. Ethan's posting from their Pi, which is awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Ethan. I'll put that up there. Thanks so much for joining us.
That's the thing that's changed, right? We've always talked about Raspberry Pi as being a PC. And of course, it always has been a PC for a particular class of user. But the really nice thing that's happened with Raspberry Pi, I guess from Raspberry Pi 3 onwards, but really with 4 and 400, they really have taken that step up into being the platform that you might use to post from. And that's wonderful. And of course, just in time, because Raspberry Pi 4 launched in 2019, 9 months before the thing happened, and so if that happened a year earlier, if the pandemic had happened a year earlier, we wouldn't have had a platform that people could use for computing for education that they could use to do it. They still learned about computers, but what they wouldn't have had a platform they could use to just get on Zoom and attend classes.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's been so incredible to see the impact and how folks have been able to take the Raspberry Pi and use it and help to create educational resources. And as a part of the pandemic, I know it's been such a struggle. I joined a group of teachers yesterday and worked with some girls, and shout out to teachers. Like, you're incredible. I've never taught in a pandemic. I did an hour and a half yesterday, and it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I commend you all for the work that you're doing and for just helping to keep our kids engaged and entertained with their learning. It's such an important thing, and it's so hard right now. So thank you for the work that you're doing. So there's a lot of excitement. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Eben.
I was going to say homeschooling has taught people some interesting lessons. A lot of parents have learned a lot of lessons about the value of teachers in the last 12 months.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think they definitely have.
I saw a young person, Lucretia, in Argentina, and they have a Raspberry Pi, and they use it for homeschooling, gaming, a little Python. Also said happy birthday. So thank you so much, Lucretia. And Eben, you mentioned earlier, Big Hero 6, getting the Raspberry Pi on there. Obviously, a big milestone. What are some other milestones for you in regards to the Raspberry Pi?
I'm putting one in space, the first one to go in space. So I'm a space geek. I mean, there were two sort of things motivated me when I was a kid. One of them was computing, the other one was space. And so, the first one under a balloon, the first time Dave Ackerman put one under a balloon and went up to 40 kilometers, that was a big deal. When we put the 2 up on the space station with Tim, that was a big deal. When we started to realize that, hey, we've got 2 Raspberry Pis on the International Space Station, when we started to realize that there were not 2 Raspberry Pis on the International Space Station, at any given time, there's an unknown number of Raspberry Pis on the International Space Station, because they just get used to automate payloads, right? They just, you send a temporary payload up, and it gets a Raspberry Pi in it. So that kind of idea, I don't think we've made it out of low Earth orbit yet. That's the one I'm waiting for. The one I really, really, really want is the one on the moon or the one on Mars, or just the one in interplanetary space. That would be plenty, Elon. Waste not putting one in that Tesla, wasn't it, really?
A little bit, yeah. I thought that might happen.
I think they're personally meaningful to me. But really, there's kind of all the way through this, there's been this continuous. People send us pictures of their kids, using a Raspberry Pi. And it's a wonderful thing, particularly with the Pi 400, which is has the sort of tactile feel of the computers I grew up with, of lying on your stomach, looking up at the family television with this in front of you in the lounge, with a computer in front of you and a cable going up to the family television, looking at this and doing computer programming. And that was my childhood. And so those pictures, because Raspberry Pi is difficult. It's hard to. We've been doing this for nearly a decade, and we've not messed up too badly on any given occasion. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard for the entire engineering team works very, very hard to deliver Raspberry Pi to you, and every Raspberry Pi comes with. It's a bit like a swan, serene on the surface mostly, serene on the surface and frantic paddling underneath. And some of those days when you've been frantically paddling, knowing that young people are having experiences with your hardware that are like the experiences you had when you were a child, that those experiences are they're more balanced in a lot of ways. If you look at the demographic problems that our computer industry has, they are the demographic problems of the 1980s home computing world, right? It's all boys. But when you look at the participants in our programs, that bias isn't anywhere near as prevalent, is almost non-existent. And that's really hopeful, because what that means is we've gone beyond the 1980s. If you think of this as a cargo cult, Raspberry Pi is a cargo cult of the 1980s. When we started, we've been able to transcend that now. We've moved beyond that. So that's lovely. And I guess then the last one is this idea that we all have someone in our, one person, 10 people probably for me, who we can point to in our childhood, who kept us going. My Auntie Sonia, who was always interested in what I was doing and would ask just, hey, what's the latest computer program you wrote? The teachers who gave me accounts on networks they shouldn't have given me accounts on or didn't have to give me accounts on. Alan Drew, who used to pick me up every Friday night and take me to Computer Club. I'd turn up and I'd have my BBC Micro and its little expanded polystyrene box, and I'd take it, put it in his people carrier, and go to Computer Club. I have all these people I can point to. And one of the wonderful things is that the Raspberry Pi, the programs that exist around the Raspberry Pi, the programs that the Raspberry Pi Foundation has created, and the things that the community has done autonomously around Raspberry Pi, is generating a series of those kinds of experiences for children today. And it means I'm just so hopeful about the computing industry. I just think the computing industry in 2040, 2050, it's going to be amazing. It's going to look a lot more like society than the computing industry looks at the moment. And there'll just be, we won't have that feeling that there were missed opportunities, that there were Mozarts, the Mozart who was born before, Mozart was born before the piano, those things. That's not
yeah. Oh,
I love
sure.
that allegory.
Yeah, have to give a shout out to the community. I see folks, especially some of our digital making at home community members, Chafia and Tunisia. Thanks for coming back and joining us today. Alex in Puerto Rico, so glad you're here. Shout out to Alex. Alex was featured actually in the Puerto Rican news talking about Pi Wars, which is so incredible. So cool. And Eben, you talked about folks who have helped you and supported you and just kept you going. I feel like my parents are actually watching, so shout out to my mom who's from Puerto Rico.
Hey.
And shout out to my dad who built computers, and when I got this job at Raspberry Pi, sent me all this homework for what I needed to do to make sure I was ready. He's like, "You've got to impress Eben Upton when you meet him." So, and he's already sending me ideas. He's like, "I need to get a Pi to flash some lights on my jacket." Hi, Dad.
That's good. I love when your dad jumps in with some top ideas. He's always got them. For those of you who are just joining us,
I didn't tell my dad I was going to be on this because I knew he would join.
Because he would watch and hassle you. Is that what you're about?
Watching the replay.
My dad is subscribed to the channel and gets alerts. He told me yesterday he was trying to make sure his phone was set up with alerts for when we go live. So he's always here, always joining. And you all can join too. Hang out with me and Mr. C. You can subscribe at rpf.io/sub. And for folks joining, happy Pi Day. We are celebrating Pi Day. We are celebrating Raspberry Pi. We are celebrating Pi. We've got some Pi showing up later. And we're talking with Eben Upton, one of the founders and CEO of Raspberry Pi.
Absolutely. So, Eben, you were talking before about we've sold nearly 40 million computers. How does that compare to what you thought would happen or your expectations when you started making the Pi?
It's 5 orders of magnitude, something like that. 5-ish, certainly 4. Really, you can't overstate how parochial our ambitions were when we started this. In terms of impact, in terms of the scale of that impact, we just wanted another couple of hundred kids to come to Cambridge. I mean, we used to talk about, well, look, if we make these computers, even if we can't, well, why don't we give them to kids who come to open days? If someone comes to an open day in June, so interviews at Cambridge are in the start of December. So if someone comes to an open day in June, why don't we give them a Raspberry Pi? And the university will pay for that. And it means when the kids come in December, you've got something to ask them. You can say, what did you do with the free computer we gave you? And if they don't say anything, don't let them in. If they have done something, it gives you something. It gives you a common point of reference. Because even then, a problem was computing is unusual because we haven't really taught it at schools very much. So you're reliant on this hobbyist stream. And B, you have because it's hobbyist streams, you have no common point of reference. So some of the most impressive guys, a chap Luke Wren, who works for us at Raspberry Pi and was very deeply involved in the engineering of RP2040, the chip that's in Raspberry Pi Pico. He did a lot of his programming on a Game Boy, a Nintendo DS, with a Chinese BASIC cart, typing the letters in with a stylus on the touch-sensitive screen of the DS, right? I mean, for starters, that's amazing. But also what it means is that what you have 100 kids come in, and without some common platform, you have no common point of reference to compare them. You don't know what to talk to them about when they come. You've got a relatively short amount of time in the interview. You don't have those common points. So that was the idea. Let's give us a common point of reference. But you can see that that's kind of like a kind of hand cranking this problem. What we're doing with Raspberry Pi now is we're trying to solve the problem at scale, right? We're trying to solve the problem at scale in the UK, but of course we're trying to solve the problem at scale in the developed world and in the developing world. But it was like the alternative is you kind of like have a little problem and you kind of hand crank it, and it's not scalable. So that's where we've come from, and that's a world of 40 or 400, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thanks for just talking about those humble beginnings. I think that's so important, especially for kids at home when they're thinking about their projects, like where you start, not necessarily where you're going to end up. And that's such an important thing. But I think that when you start from a humble beginning, when you start with a good intent, that's what's led us to be where we are and to make the impact that we're making. And now you talked a little bit and I know you can't give any specific details, but what future do you see for Raspberry Pi computers? Like when you retire, what do you hope to have achieved?
We want all the compute. We want all the compute in the world to happen on Raspberry Pis. Not all's unfair. There are high-end games computers that we're not going to make high-end games computers. There are high-end CAD workstations. There are servers that have very high single-threaded performance. They're kind of various specialist areas of computing. They're big specialist areas of computing, and they're not places we can play. But everything else we want.
Amazing. So you're hoping to like take market share from Intel and stuff like that. That's the intent.
We think we can provide platforms that let people do computing in more efficient ways, more effective more cost-effective price points, and therefore more people can do computing. So there's kind of like we're talking about taking market share, but you can really talk about creating market share, right?
Yeah, definitely.
There are so many people who are not computing right now. There are so many problems which are computable but which are not computed, and a lot of that is about cost structure, and a lot of it's about energy. Not just the cost of the object, but the total cost of ownership of the object, the cost of replacing it when it breaks, the cost of servicing it when it breaks, the cost of getting electricity into it, the cost of getting heat out of it once you've got electricity into it. All of those things. We think that we're big believers in the ARM platform, right? We're an ARM-based computer company, and we're a big believer that platform, that ecosystem, unlocks another order of magnitude of computing in the world. And we're super excited to be part of it. And of course, we've been flying the flag. Of course, there's another fruit company has released some general purpose computers based on the ARM architecture a few days after Raspberry Pi 400. So they were second. Okay. But it's a wonderful, in a lot of ways, it's a wonderful vindication that we've been talking about the power of the ARM architecture in general purpose computing, in PC computing for a decade now. And it's interesting to see other people coming on board with that.
Definitely. And I think that's my favorite thing about what Raspberry Pi did. And from the very beginning, you guys were like, you were renegade, right? You turned Moore's law on its head with the intention of democratizing technology instead of doing the opposite, which is making it more powerful and more expensive, where less people can get hold of it. It's just the polar opposite to that. It's amazing. It's very cool.
And you can see that was what Zero was, right? Zero was this reaction to realizing that we'd become the enemy. That what we'd done was, if you talk about the two things you can do with Moore's law, you can pick a price and as you can fill it up with computing, and every year you fill it up with more computing. And that's what the PC industry has traditionally done. I mean, for a very long time, it's come down a bit now, but for a very long time, £1,000 was the cost of a PC. And every year you'd fill it with more stuff. Or you can take a fixed amount of computing and you can ride the cost curve down. And of course, that's what we did with Raspberry Pi. It's
absolutely incredible, right? Like to have this $35, the Raspberry Pi. It's just, and I know Matt said it earlier, folks. We got your Raspberry Pis. We're going to be playing with them, and I just have to shout out. We had some folks, SF on YouTube. We love Raspberry Pi. Aiton and Ella from Texas. We're seeing folks just saying a world where you can innovate, imagine, create. That's a Pi world. And folks, just a lot of love for you, Eben. A lot of love from the Raspberry Pi community for all the work that we're doing. And
thanks for coming, Eben, today.
Yeah, thank you, Eben. Thank you so much for being here.
I would just like, when you get a chance, ask Matt about Wolf.
Okay.
Because it was 6 years to the day since at 9. So it was the Century Pi moment was 3:14:15 at 9:26 in the morning, and Matt and I went to a party at 9:26 in the morning in Austin at South by Southwest, thrown by Wolf.
No way.
They had a breakdancing wolf, and they had little pies, and it was very pleasant actually. So ask Matt about the wolf.
I will. Don't you worry. I will definitely be asking him about that. I love it. Thanks for coming on today and giving us embarrassing stories about our boss, man. That's super cool.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you again.
Thank you, Eben. Have a great rest of your evening. Bye.
Bye. Oh. Okay.
Wow, like when we talk to Eben, I always feel like I end up like I go to space with Eben.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Just like process and come back down, and just the story. I think for me, the most him identifying and recognizing just the humble beginnings of Raspberry Pi, and thinking about the impact and from like pop culture to just the work that has been happening over the last year and the accessibility of the Raspberry Pi. It's just, it's so incredible. And if you're joining us now, welcome. We still have a ton of awesome celebrations ahead of us on this special Pi Day episode of Digital Making at Home.
Yeah, and now we've actually got a special message from the community because everyone wanted to say Happy Pi Day to us. Let's have a look at it.
Babbage and I just wanted to wish you a happy Pi Day!
Happy Pi Day!
Hello and happy Pi Day!
Have a very happy Pi Day to everyone.
Happy Pi Day! Happy Pi Day!
All right, Cassie, press it.
Yay! Happy Pi Day!
Happy Pi Day!
3.14159238
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Happy Pi Day!
Oh, that was amazing. So many of our friends from Digital Making at Home sent in videos. That was super cool. I love the one about like the reciting the digits of pi super duper fast. That was pretty impressive.
That was fantastic. Adarsh, Jill, Eleanor, the Minecraft. That was Cassie. How did Cassie make a video? Cool. Thank you for sending in those Pi Day greetings, everyone. And also, thanks for the Pi Day love in the chat. I see Deepa from Milan is saying hello, saying congratulations from me out. Like, thank you all so much for celebrating Pi Day with us today. We're having such a fun time. So, all right, Mr. C, now it's time for some coding. What are we going to be making today?
Cool. So today we're going to make an interactive book. So we're going to knock up a little thing that's sort of like a page from a book, and you could make a whole bunch of these pages and create an entire interactive book with your Raspberry Pi, so that when you touch the book with the magic wand that we're about to make, it will do something on screen. It will activate something inside your program. So we'll start doing that, shall we?
All right. Yes. Okay. So what materials do we need?
Okay. So here on my workbench, I've got a few bits here. So you'll need some tape. Just like this here, I've got gaffer tape. I've always got some of that lying around. Gaffer tape WD-40. You can save the universe with those items. Jumper cables. I've got a glue stick because I'm going to need to glue some cardboard. I've got a craft knife. Okay, so if you're young, make sure your parents are here watching you and supervising you while you have a craft knife, because they are very, very, very sharp. And I've got a marker and some aluminium foil for our American friends. That's aluminum foil, I think. And my Pi, obviously. I have my Raspberry Pi.
All right. Well, let's jump in.
Totally. Let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is we've got our Scratch project here. Okay. And so for my blank Scratch project, the first thing I want to do is add my GPIO extension. So I click my little extension block down the bottom, and I've got my Raspberry Pi Simple Electronics. So I'll just pop that one up here, and you see we'll add all my nice green blocks. That is like when my button is pressed. Okay. So when button is pressed, do a thing. And so today the pin I'm going to be using is pin 21, because it's the one that's like right on the corner. You remember me, Christina? I'm quite lazy about what pins I use, and the one in the corner,
you've got your favorites.
Easiest one to get to. So I'll just make my blocks a tiny bit bigger.
Yeah, can you zoom in a little bit? Oh, great, I can see it.
How's that? Can you read that now, Christina, or a bit more?
Yes. And I think this is great, because this is a great example of what Eben was talking about, just the physical computing, because we're using the Raspberry Pi. We've got all those fun pieces of equipment there, and we're using Scratch with the GPIO pins. This is a really awesome example of physical computing with the Raspberry Pi.
Absolutely. And like you know me, physical computing is totally my jam. It's my favorite thing to do. It's the reason I love Raspberry Pi so much. Back when I was teaching and doing all that sort of stuff, getting the Raspberry Pis out and seeing the looks on kids' faces when they make a thing
come to life. It truly makes it come to life. Right?
Unbelievably cool. So I've got here, you see here on my camera here. So I've got a suspension file out of one of my filing cabinets, but you could use any cardboard. If you have an old cereal box, just cut the biggest sides off of it. Any cardboard you've got lying around the house will work. I just like this because it's kind of got like a little spine on it that I can use, and when I mesh them all together with zip ties, I can make a whole book out of these. So I'm going to fold it inside out so the blank sides are out. Okay, that's my book page. And then what I want to do is on one side of this, I need to cut a picture. So the first thing I'll do is draw my picture. So I think I'll keep it simple for today, and I'll do a star. So
awesome. And if folks were with us last week, you actually gave like a sneak preview of this project, which
yeah, I did.
Yeah, they might have seen it. So we're actually getting to make it today, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I see a question from David real quick, just asking if this is being recorded. Yes, David, all of our past digital making at home streams and this one are on our channel. So you can rpf.io/sub, and you can see this one in past streams and future streams as well.
Cool. So what I'm doing now is I'm just cutting out my star so that I'm going to remove this piece of the cardboard. So while you're doing this, yeah, I'm being careful. I was just about to say, if you're at home doing this one, then you need to also be careful and make sure that you are supervised while you do this. Okay, so what have I got? You want to pull this out. Okay, so there's my star. Okay, you can see it here, the shape aside. So there's my cutout. Okay, it's a little bit janky because I'm in a hurry, but that's all right. I'll show you my fancy one that took me like half a day later. And then I take my aluminium foil and I just rip off a chunk that is bigger than the hole I've just cut. So I put it down here, I have a look at the hole, and then I just go like this, and I rip off my chunk of aluminum. And then I make sure that it covers the whole thing. Yep, cool. So I just rip off the extra pieces. Fantastic. And then I take my glue stick and I just put some glue around the edge of my star here.
Nice. And again, there's no judgment from me. It's always hard to draw a star. I've been trying to draw one since I was a kid. It takes like I'd be very impressed if there was someone on the stream today who could draw a star on a live stream perfectly. So
I could have done one of the pentagram style ones, but this is fine. So once I've got my glue on there, I basically just press my aluminium foil down, making sure with my one specifically that I don't touch the metal, okay, because I'll get a short otherwise. So I'll pull my aluminium foil back, make sure it's not touching my metal spine. But if you're just using regular cardboard, you won't have this issue. And then so I push it down around where I've glued, and then I just pull off some of the extra parts that are hanging out the edge that look a bit messy, just so we can't see them. And then when I close this up and turn it over, you'll see that you can now see a star that is exposed on my page.
Yes.
Right? Cool. So this now is going to be like a button or a contact. So when we using the Scratch project, it calls it a button, right? Because a button is really just a thing that closes a circuit. So anytime you close two contacts and make that circuit go, then you're using a button. And that's what we've just built here. This is essentially, for intents and purposes, a button. So to make it a contact, I need to take one of my jumper leads. It doesn't matter whether you've got a female, FF or an MF, as long as you leave the F end on. So take your two jumper cables and pull one of the ends off to expose the wire.
Okay.
Right? That's simple. And then I just spread the wire out a little bit. And I've got a metal end now that's exposed, and I just tape that contact down to my aluminium foil. So I make sure that it goes into a little fold of my foil. I take my duct tape and I tape it down. So the reason we're doing that is that now this wire will connect to my Pi.
Which is going to connect to the Scratch program.
You got it.
It's all coming together.
So let's pop this tape down. Cool. So I've taped my contact down to my metal. Fantastic. I've got my book page now. So I can connect this to my pin 21. Extra one off. I don't need that. Pin 21. Cool. So I've got it connected. And now earlier I made this thing. So this is basically, it's literally just a pencil covered in tin foil and then wrapped with a bit of tape to keep a wire stuck to the end. And this is now my ground pin. So I've connected this one to any of the G and D pins on your Raspberry Pi will work. So you can connect to anywhere there. Cool. So like I say, any G and D pin will work for your controller. And then we connect this one to 21. So when button 21 is pressed, what do I want it to do, Christina? What should I get it to do?
Oh gosh, are we going to get the cat to do something?
Oh, whatever you want. Yeah, so the cat is our current sprite. So I can have it like move, get bigger, spin around, whatever you want.
Oh, let's do a spin around.
Do spin around. Nice. Cool. That's always a good one. So we go to our motion and we say turn 15 degrees, and then we'll get a loop in there so that it will do it a bunch of times for us. So turn 15 degrees, and we'll get it to do that 30 times just because that's the number to use. So let's go change that now.
It is so neat because this is the start of what you can do, right? And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking with Rob from Magpie Magazine and look at some other really incredible Raspberry Pi projects. So definitely stay tuned with us. We're going to be exploring all the different ways that you can have fun and create with Raspberry Pi.
Cool. So now you see I've got my little wand here. I've got my contact. And if I just touch it to my page, you'll see the Scratch cat on my screen. So I just touch the metal to the metal.
Oh, so cool.
And it makes my cat spin around.
It's like magic. Okay. It really is like magic, which is so neat.
A little, yeah, a little. So and that's kind of where I got the idea, right? So like I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, like you know that about me. So so what I thought was a cool thing I could make would be like an interactive like wizard spell book. And so I showed you the preview of it previously. So I sort of knocked this up. This is my spell book. And so you can see it's got a bunch of different pages in it. So I've got a dragon, I've got a unicorn, I've got a fairy. There's also like a magic wand. And I've got a cauldron with stars. And so if I touch these. So
cool. Oh, hi, Sally. And such a great project for students. I use Scratch a lot. So to combine these together is incredible. Right, William? This is a really neat way. And I love, Mr. C, that you brought in like just some basic materials that most folks have at home, right? Like have paper, aluminum foil. I don't know how to pronounce it. Pronunciation. And some wires.
And that's the best thing about all of it is that most of the stuff that we do is very, very easily done just at home, right? Like I say, aluminium foil does the contacts and it does the transmission of electricity. And then beyond that, whatever you turn it into is totally up to you. You can basically just make anything that you want. I just have one of my jumpers come loose, but I'll stick it back together. There we go. And so you see, if I turn to any one of these pages, I've got another Scratch project that I wrote. And so if I grab my wand here, you won't be able to get the sound today, but it does have sound. So if I touch the dragon gets bigger. If I touch the unicorn gets bigger. If I touch fairy, obviously they change. And each one of these has its own individual sound effect and those sorts of things. But you can make it do whatever you want. The next step for me is to make a book that can read itself. So I'd like to write a book and then have that book. So like as an accessibility tool almost, I think it'd be a really cool toy to make. Would be a book like I would write a story. And then as you touch the pages, it would read the story to you. I think that'd be a really nice little project to put together.
Oh my God, Mr. C, that was okay. Also, it says magic book on it. So yes, this is like magic. This is definitely like magic. And I appreciate who's it? Christopher. Yeah. LOL, Christopher. It's so cool. I think for me as a kid to be able to create something. And I think I was at a session yesterday and someone mentioned that coding is like a superpower in a way. It's where you can really create what's something that's in your mind and make it come to life with code. And you just made a book with a wand and it interacts. Like it's such a neat project. Thank you so much, Mr. C. That was a really cool activity. And I'm seeing a lot of folks like, this is so interesting. This is amazing. Could you do this in Python too? Could you answer that question?
100%. Yep, totally. It like I'm using Scratch because like I love Scratch, right? Like I'm a Scratch whiz. It's the thing that I'm the best at, and I can do it really quickly. And we've talked about it before. I prototype things in Scratch and then go to Python, and you could do this in Python straight up, no problem. It'd be quite easy to do. You could do it on a Pico and then embed the Pico in the book and then carry the book around, right? If you had a Pico and a book and a small phone charger, you could embed the phone charger inside the spine of the book and then carry the thing around with you, like it would be a portable magic book. Actually, I'm going to do that.
All right. Yes. Oh, and quick question, Mr. C, which Raspberry Pi were you using? Just out of curiosity.
I've got a 4, so I'm using a 4 here. Usually for my daily driver, I use a 4. I'll prototype on a 4 because it's the fastest. And then when I want to embed, I'll go down to a 0 or a Pico, depending on what I need to do. If I need Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, I'll go for a 0W. And then if I need a really simple device, I'll just grab a Pico because they're super compatible.
Yes, yes. And definitely check out some of our past streams. We've talked about how to get started with the Pico. Mr. C did an awesome sort of getting started guide. So definitely check those out. You can go to rpf.io/sub and that'll take you to our channel. So thanks, Mr. C. And as many of you know, Raspberry Pi Foundation is a nonprofit. And this year we're embracing Pi Day. We're celebrating Pi Day today as a time to support young learners and creators in our community. Millions of learners use the Raspberry Pi Foundation's online digital making projects to develop new skills and get creative with technology. And it's totally free.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, right? Like, I just want to take a minute to thank over 300, that's right, everybody, 300 Pi Day donors who have supported our important work. Not only are these people helping us to make a difference in the lives of young people all over the world, but they're also getting their names printed in an upcoming issue of the official Raspberry Pi magazine, The Magpie.
Yes, yes, thank you so much. And if you'd like to join this awesome Pi Day donor crew, please head to rpf.io/Pi Day 2021 today. And that's not all. As a way to show how grateful we are, we're sending 3 Pi Day donors a Raspberry Pi t-shirt, so you can look as fancy as us, Raspberry Pi tote bag, and an issue of Magpie signed by Eben. And awesome. I'm getting word that at least one of our Pi Day donors is in the chat tonight, which is pretty cool. That's really, really neat. We've got a Pi Day donor in the chat.
That is awesome. And I'd love a signed copy of that magazine.
Right? Yeah, maybe we'll have to enter. For sure. Yes, and speaking of Magpie, now it's actually time to chat with our Magpie magazine correspondent, Rob. My friend Rob is a features editor and knows a lot about Raspberry Pi and is going to share about some super cool Raspberry Pi projects. Let's bring him on. Come on, Rob.
Hello.
Hey, Rob.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good. It's good to see you. Rob, I had someone ask if we were going to be having some Raspberry Pi on the stream today, and I know you do, my friend.
I made Pi just because I am very silly.
That looks delicious.
It is delicious, yes. Thank
you made that from scratch?
I didn't make the dough. I can't take.
You didn't have to say it. Nice work. Oh, that's so. Oh, I love it. I love it. So yes, we've got some Raspberry Pi. Like I said earlier, folks, we've got our Raspberry Pi. We're seeing folks saying hello in the chat. Hi, Rob. Yes, we're so glad you're here. Well, Rob, let's jump right in. I'm so excited to have you. We are going to talk about some of some incredible Raspberry Pi projects. So let's start with the first one.
Yeah, so the first one we're going to talk about is something called We Still Facts, which the video should be loading on the side that way. There we go. This is a very special project that we had in the Magpie a few months ago from a group called Ants Theatre, and they're like a group of artists that usually put on events and shows for people. But due to the current people staying at home situation, they decided to do something a little bit different. So they took an actual fax machine, the classic joke kind of piece of tech from the 80s and 90s, and they actually put a Raspberry Pi in it and other stuff to make it into this like interactive art piece / escape room you kind of answer the phone and you make phone calls with it, and even send a fax. You get to learn the ancient art of fax sending. So yeah, have any of you actually ever used a fax machine? Because I used to, like, about 10 years ago, which is very strange.
We had one at home. My parents had like a home business, and they had a fax machine.
Wow. Yeah, we had. I remember we had one at my school I used to work at, and we would have to send like information over. So I am just amazed, and the idea that's also an escape room, that's just really creative. That's so neat.
Yes.
I was going to ask and see if anyone in the chat has used a fax machine. We still fax. Oh, I love it. How about the next project, Rob?
Right.
My favorite.
Well, this is something that came in, I found out about a week ago, I believe. It's called the Star Wars Arcade Cabinet, which is, it looks like an old school, I can't remember this game came out. It's a Star Wars Arcade Cabinet, like a very old vector graphics arcade machine that you'd have seen in the early 80s. But this is made from scratch. It's not something someone's taken and kind of refurbished and upcycled. No, they've laser cut this thing from scratch and made it, and it's like 3/4 size. It's a bit smaller and probably a bit lighter than the old school vector graphics one. I mean, look at that detail; it's incredible, right? So and it's all powered by a Raspberry Pi. A lot of people who do retro gaming stuff love the Raspberry Pi because it's very small, doesn't use much power, and there's loads and loads of little bits and pieces you can use. Like, say, you can see the Picade hat on top of the Raspberry Pi there, which is perfect for making your, the arcade system of your dreams. Even if it's, a 40-year-old Star Wars game with graphics that you've only seen in like jokes and stuff. So, but no, it's a classic. It's a true classic arcade game.
That's amazing. That's so cool. I've got a Picade at home. I built one, and I set it up in the office sometimes on the massive big projector screen and let everyone play like old school games. But you get a lot of like the homebrew stuff too. People do a lot of homebrew things for like. That's really cool with the main.
Absolutely, yes. For people looking for homebrew games, there's a great site called itch.io, which you can find a lot of homebrew games for old consoles. So if you're thinking, haven't played a NES game in a while, but I don't want to play any old ones, you can find a new NES game just for you from itch.io.
Amazing.
Love this. The creativity here and just the fact that they built it is really incredible. And I have to say, we're getting some love for the Magpie in the chat, Rob, from Peter, saying that just like lots of love for the Magpie here. I want to show that one. Feel that love. Thank you, Peter. I have to peek up. Sorry, I didn't mean to block you, Rob.
No. I picked up because my microphone is down there, so I can't look over the screen.
And then I mentioned earlier that we had someone in the chat who's actually a donor. I couldn't find them at first, but I found them. Thomas, thank you so much on YouTube. You're a donor. We really appreciate it and appreciate you. Fingers crossed that maybe you win the t-shirt or the signed copy of the Magpie. All right, let's hear about another project, Rob.
Okay, so this one's a little bit older, but it's probably my all-time favorite Raspberry Pi project. All-time favorite, not all-team favorite. That's a different thing. This is called the Tomy Turning Turbo Dashboard Outrun Arcade. And you may have seen it a little while ago. This is a very old kind of toy from, I guess, the late 80s. I'm not sure if I had one or not, but it's been completely overhauled to play one of my favorite arcade games of all time, Outrun. And it uses the little gear stick. It has kind of a fuel gauge. It has live speed. We'll get up there in a second. See the speeds up there. It's amazing. And this guy, Circuit Beard, he's created loads of awesome projects that have kind of upcycled this old tech. I'm a big lover of upcycling in Raspberry Pi projects, and we feature a lot in the Magpie. But I also extremely appreciate the fact he's added like Sega decals and updated some of the other bits and pieces. And yeah, again, all powered by a Raspberry Pi. And this is a 4-year-old project, so stuff like this has been going on for a long, long time now, and it is amazing, right? It just looks incredible.
That level of detail and workmanship.
Oh, it's so cute. I just love how cute it is. Oh, all right. Let's keep going, Rob. We've got another one. Let's see it.
Okay, so this is the K Berlin food computer, which is I'm talking about in the next issue of the Magpie, coming out a couple of weeks' time. This is yes. So this guy here, Chris Regini, is a teacher in New York, Long Island area.
Shout out USA!
Yes. And he contacted me and was telling me about the stuff that his students have been making over lockdown and learning from home. And it's a food computer. You can see bits and pieces of it here. And this is like, you could just put like a little soil sensor into some soil and all we need is a bit of water. this does so much more than that. There's soil sensor, obviously moisture sensor, as I said. There's pH balance, humidity, temperature. There's even like a special UV plant lights above it as well, as you can see here. And it's all automated, and it controls some pumps as well. So Raspberry Pi will see if the soil has got the right pH balance. If it doesn't, it'll spray the right kind of stuff into it so that the balance changes. And this is all citizen science stuff. So it's kind of open source, and all the data is going back to a big kind of science thing. And not only is it automated, but it can be done manually and it can be done remotely, which allows the students at home to actually kind of work on it and see how it's going. And frankly, it is, I also, as well as upcycling, I love kind of home growing stuff. And I think, something like this is very cool, something that can be built with, stuff you can get off the shelf, from the internet, from your local electronics component supplier.
I know, and just on the shelf now.
Yeah. And just the Raspberry Pi, although I think the little kind of box they've got is a special one, but I'm sure you can make one out of, cardboard or something. So yeah. It's fantastic.
This is such a neat one. I have to tell, all right, my dad, I said he was watching earlier. I want him to check out this. He's newly retired and has just got really into gardening. I got tons of photos of the backyard yesterday. So getting ready for spring. So Dad, check out this project. You can automate it. You can be checking the pH, like moisture, like that. There's so many things you can do, and it's all automated with the Raspberry Pi.
There's a little heating plate underneath it to make sure the plants are nice and cozy as well. Isn't that fantastic?
Fully automate your little salad grower. That's amazing.
Definitely. Okay, last but certainly not least, let's check out our final project, Rob.
Again, a recent Magpie project. This is the Hubble Pi. And this is, it looks like a telescope, but you can see a Raspberry Pi on the back there. Now, telescopes have many functions, and one of them, kind of more modern functions, is automatic tracking with software that allow you to say, I want to look at, this constellation or this planet, and your telescope will sort of track it. But one of the very cool things about this is that the creator has also put one of the high quality camera modules onto the eyepiece, so you can actually take photos of the stuff you look at. And he showed us some fantastic pictures of the moon. Matt will get there eventually, but there we go. Yes.
It was so close. It was so close. I appreciate the try. All right, we'll do it one more time. One night.
The moon. Thank you. Yes, perfect. But yeah, no. This is very cool. It's actually remarkably simple. Obviously, you need to have your quite nice, a little bit expensive telescopes, but then you just connect $40, $50, 40 quid of tech, and you've got a pretty great tracking system and photography system, so you can do your astrophotography. And honestly, who doesn't like looking at the stars when it's a nice clear night and getting some nice photos, right?
Yeah, I feel like that's something very, very common in this community. It's something that just, besides our love of pie,
it's Jupiter.
It's space. Whoa, stop. You said it's Jupiter?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
you see the stripes. That's cool.
Exactly right. I went out. I was reviewing a product a little while ago that had a telescope, and I managed to point it at Saturn, and I saw the rings, and I was like, "Oh, that's amazing! What's going on?"
I remember the first time I saw Saturn, I fell over.
Yeah,
it was wild. And I remember my dad had a telescope that had a motor on it, so it was falling. And I remember he turned it off, and then it was like, I was like, "Oh, we're moving." We're like, this is not a game. Oh, this is so incredible. Seeing awesome. Folks just like also like this is just, it's made of cheese, right? Very, very us mumblings on YouTube. Like when you can see these projects, you can see that the moon is made of cheese. And
Absolutely.
Just a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for these projects. Thank you all so much for commenting in the chat. We really appreciate it. Now, Rob, before you go, I definitely want you to mention a little bit about Month of Making.
Yes,
please share with that. Like how.
So that Star Wars arcade thing is actually kind of what part of Month of Making. Month of Making is our sort of every March, every year. We're like, hey, start making something, make a bit, make your dream project, whatever. Just do something you want to do. Take some photos, share it with the community. And normally we do a lot of sharing of Raspberry Pi and Raspberry Pi Pico projects, but for Month of Making, we really like just to do any kind of making, whether it's traditional kind of crafting style making, like knitting and sewing and embroidery, or baking your Raspberry Pis. I've been assembling a robot model and putting decals on. I need to take some photos of it soon, and we just love to kind of inspire the community and hope that they want to share their products and talk to other people about what they're sharing. The Raspberry Pi community is great for helping as well. So, always asking a question, you very likely get a pretty good answer from people in the community, whether it's on the Raspberry Pi forum or if it's via Twitter. We'll retweet stuff and try and get people to help you, and they're normally very good at that. It's going to the end of the month. I mean, obviously, don't stop making at the end of March. You keep making, but we just want you to kind of experiment, just do what you want to do, and as the great Bob Ross says, and I think I said it on my last time on the stream, we don't have mistakes, we just have happy accidents. So you can always be learning, even if you're like, I tried to do a bit of spray painting, but it didn't go very well. But you've learned for next time or something like that. I tried to do some fluffy big souffle pancake yesterday. They collapsed, but next time I might get them. I really want to get them because they are delicious when they're good. So just tweet about it.
Yes, hashtag month of making. Check it out. Share what you're making. Like Rob said, it doesn't have to be like a technology project. It could be anything from baking to sewing to painting to creating. We just want to really encourage folks this month to explore and create. And share your failures too. Like Rob said, this community is incredible and they want to support you. We want to support you. So we'd love to see what you're making. Well, Rob, that was so much fun. I hope we're going to bring you on again. Definitely. I really appreciate you sharing all those really cool projects, and we'll talk to you soon. Happy Pi Day, Rob.
Very much. See you later, guys.
Later, Rob.
Bye. What an incredible bunch of projects. It's just so neat to see. Like Raspberry Pi is really such a versatile machine for creation. It's incredible.
It's so cool, and it's exactly what Eben was talking about, right? Like the idea of democratizing technology. Once upon a time, people building these sorts of things would have been very rare, vanishingly rare. Super hobbyists, like people locked away in basements, and now almost anybody can go out and make these things, and people have made them and shared instructions so other people can make them. You learn from other people's mistakes. It's just the whole community every day makes my heart sing. It's really cool. Yeah, big shout out to this community, and like what you just said, Mr. C, it makes my heart sing as well. Like that's one of the best parts about this job is just connecting with folks, and with digital making at home, that's what this has been about. While we're all staying home, staying safe, digital making at home has been a way to connect with you all and share just how much fun we're having with digital making. So let's check in on that Octopi calculator, see how far along it's progressed. Oh, wow. Okay, so that's cool, right? So we can see it like it's doing these calculations randomly. So you can see that the numbers are stable up until 3.141, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not changing there. And then it's making more and more guesses and guesses. 3.1419 is stable.
Okay.
Right. So it's going to keep extending pi as it gets more and more answers, and it can start working it out. It will start seeing that become more and more stable. The numbers that don't change at the beginning will become more and more digits of that number. And like, there are way quicker ways to calculate pi than this one, but this one is just one of the coolest ones.
Yes. Oh gosh, what a day of Pi, Raspberry Pi, and Pi. We hope you all enjoyed tonight's show. It was so great to see so many of you getting involved in the chat. Shout out to all of our friends. Shout out to my parents.
Shout out to you folks.
Really appreciate you. I saw a lot of just comments and questions. Zellatrix, Peter, Larry, Zetaform. So many folks in the chat. It was really incredible. So to Thomas for being a donor. Remember, you can still donate for Pi Day and get entered to win a shirt and or a Magpie, a signed Magpie. Thank you all so much for being here.
And yeah, thank you all for being here for the Raspberry Pi Foundation's Digital Making at Home special Pi Day stream. Don't forget, we usually broadcast Wednesdays at 7 p.m. GMT, but next Wednesday we're taking a little break. So be sure to subscribe and you'll get those notifications when we go live so you don't miss the next show. Until then, stay safe and healthy and happy Pi Day.